Hello BookTube, I'm Vanessa and today I'm here to do my July wrap-up. So, as usual, in July, I had to read some books for school, but I also got to do some personal reading this month, which was amazing as well. So I'm going to start off with the school stuff. The first thing I read for class was this book called Voyage in the Dark by Jean Rhys. This is for my Women in Literature class, and it's set during the early 1900s, and it follows the story of a young girl named Anna who grew up in the Caribbean. But after the death of her father, she had to move to England to live with some distant relatives that aren't really doing a great job of taking care of her, and she gets involved in like prostitution and I don't know, just a lot. It was written in stream of consciousness, so it was like kind of hard to follow what was going on. There were definitely things that I think I would have really liked and enjoyed reading about in this story if it hadn't been in stream of consciousness, because I just honestly, you guys, I hate stream of consciousness, and that's something that just can ruin any book for me instantly. So it was okay. It was like mediocre for me. Then the next book that I read, also for my Women in Literature class, was The Corinthian by Georgette Heyer. This is a romance novel that was written during the 40s, but it's set during the Regency period. So it's kind of like a Jane Austen setting, but with like more modern sensibilities, if you know what I mean. The romance story in this book is about a young girl who's running away from her family because they want her to marry her cousin or something. And on her way out, she ends up meeting up with this guy who is also kind of running away from this girl that his family wants him to marry, and they end up like running away on a road trip together, and then they end up getting wrapped up in this like really kooky jewel heist and like murder mystery thing. So this was like my first adventure into the romance novel world, and I kind of liked it. You know, it was like corny and easy and fun, but at the same time, like, we did our whole unit that week while we were reading this book on the value and the importance of romance as a genre. So I kind of like, I have a new appreciation for the value of that. Okay, so the next book I finally finished, and I am so excited. Nicholas and Alexandra. I'm finally done. I read the whole thing. I feel like I've been reading this book for like 6 months now and getting nowhere, so I am so happy that I finally completed it, and it was so good. This book is about Nicholas and Alexandra Romanov and the fall of the Romanov dynasty in Russia, who, again, if you're not familiar, these are Anastasia's parents, and this is the story of what happened to Anastasia's family. In case anyone is not an Anastasia fan, which I don't know why you wouldn't be, the Romanov family were the royal family in Russia, and during the early 1900s there was a lot of like political tension and a lot of revolutionary stuff going on where people didn't really want to have a royal family anymore. And basically through a huge chain of events, a 600-page book chain of events, the family ends up having to abdicate the throne. But even after they abdicate willingly, the new government finds it necessary to imprison them and treat them as prisoners, and eventually they decide it's necessary to execute them. So the entire family, the Tsar, the Empress, their 5 children, their youngest son was only like 13 years old or something, they were all shot to death in a basement somewhere in the mountains in Siberia. And the reason this event in this family kind of became so iconic was that there were a lot of rumors that the youngest daughter, Anastasia, might have survived and escaped. For many years there were a lot of people coming forward and trying to claim that they were Anastasia, but even though I grew up loving the movie Anastasia and being just like obsessed with it, I never knew the actual history and the political background of why her family was murdered. So this book was so interesting to read. It is a nonfiction, but it doesn't read like a boring nonfiction book. It reads very smoothly. It has a good narrative structure to it. There are some parts that are a little bit dry, like when they're talking about the war strategy and what advisor of what department wanted to send what unit to what part of the front lines, and it's like some of that I definitely skimmed through, but the parts especially that are about the royal family and the events that were just like more immediately surrounding them were so interesting to me, and it felt like I was reading a novel. I think one really interesting thing about this book that most Anastasia fans will appreciate is that it goes a lot into Rasputin and who Rasputin actually was and what his role to play in all of these events were. So I was super excited to find out that he is just as weird and creepy as the animated movie made him seem to be. Anyways, then I had enough time to read one last personal reading thing in the month of July, and I decided to read the graphic novel Blackbird Volume 1, which I really enjoyed because first of all, the artwork is so good. Oh my god, it's beautiful. The coloring, everything is just such an amazing style. and I loved it. And I also really liked the story. It's about this girl who, there's like this big earthquake, and she remembers like this giant lion beast spirit thing coming and like saving her and her sister, but then it did magic to make everyone forget that it had been there. But the main character didn't forget. She just pretended to forget, and she's gone her whole life knowing the truth that there are these beings out there called paragons, and they're basically like, I don't know, like supernatural, like god type creatures, I guess. And everyone thinks that she's crazy, but as an adult, she discovers that they are actually real, and she gets wrapped up in them, and there's this chain of events that leads her to kind of being involved in the paragon world. It's just the volume 1, so it's just the beginning of this story, but I really liked it. I'm really intrigued by it, and I can't wait to see where the rest of that story goes. That is everything that I read in July. I am super happy that I finally got to finish Nicholas and Alexandra. Like, honestly, that is just the highlight of my entire year so far, to be completely honest. So yeah, I am super happy. Let me know in the comments what you read in July, and I hope you liked this video, and I hope I get to talk to you soon. Bye!